Hello everyone, today I'll be showing you how to make a cat basket out of rolled up newspaper. First things first, you'll need newspaper. You'll also need some glue. I recommend a quick drying glue or tacky glue. A US knitting needle 2 or something similar. Some scissors. A spray bottle filled with water. Something that has a mist setting will work best, but you can always just dip your fingers in a bowl of water. A marker to mark your starting tube. A straight edge. Pliers are optional, but they help when things get too tight to do by hand. Also optional is X-Acto knife and cutting mat to make cutting a little faster. Paper, bowl, measuring tool, and pen are all for your template. First, we'll need to cut the newspaper, making sure to cut along the grain of the paper. You can usually tell by which side has the rough edge, but it's a good idea to tear a little to make sure. It should tear clean like this. If it tears like this, then it's the wrong direction. So we'll be cutting along this long edge here. I marked out 3 inches here so I can line up the paper and cut quickly. If you don't have an X-Acto knife, you can also cut with scissors. I recommend measuring along each side, then connecting the lines to create as straight of a line as possible. When you get to the end, you may notice that your last piece isn't quite big enough. That's okay. If it's only a little bit smaller like this, then you're good. However, if it's off by a lot, like this, then you won't be able to use it. Now, to roll the paper, place your paper at a slight angle with the needle sticking about 2 inches out. Then roll it as tightly as possible. Dab a little glue on the end, and you're all set. It can get pretty tight, so I'll use the pliers here if I can't pull it out. I ended up using 233 tubes, so put on a good show and I'll see you when you're done.
One eternity later.
Now that we're done rolling our newspaper, we'll be making our template. On your paper or cardboard, we're going to start by grabbing our bowl, or whatever you chose to trace. Flip our bowl upside down. We're going to trace around half of the bowl. Slide it over for what seems like a good length for your cat. Make sure it's lined up. And trace the other half of the bowl. Alright, we're done with the bowl. That was all we needed it for. So we'll now connect our 2 semicircles. We need to do some math now to figure out how many tubes we'll need for our skeleton. Start off by measuring the width and length of your basket. My basket is 34 centimeters by 25 centimeters. First, I'll divide my width in half and get 12.5 centimeters. Then we'll measure 12.5 centimeters first from the top, and then from the side, and the second one will be your mark. Do this on both sides and connect the 2 points. For a sturdy basket, we want spokes of our skeleton to be about 1.3 centimeters apart, so measure your line and divide it by 1.3. If it is above 0.2, I recommend rounding up. Then take the length of your line and divide it by this number. This will tell you exactly how far apart our spokes will be here. Mark your line accordingly and extend your marks outwards. This will create 4 quadrants. Now we will calculate the circumference of our oval. I used a calculator I found by Googling circumference of an oval, and it's the first result. My circumference is 93.75. Divide this by 1.3. I got 72.1. Round this to the nearest 5 following the above 2 rule. Now I'm at 75. Add 1, and this is the total number of spokes in our skeleton. Lastly, we have to take these into account. Since these count as 2, I already have 16 laid out. Take our total number of spokes, subtract how many we already have. Got 60, divide that by 4, and that's how many we need to add to each quadrant. Then I just cut my template out to make it a little bit easier to handle. Alright, grab your newspaper again, we can finally start weaving. Lay out a tube on each of the lines you marked earlier. And grab 2 more. These 2 tubes will be our working tube, and a tip for working tubes is to soften them by wetting them and bending them. You don't want them to be too wet and fall apart or rip, but just enough to be able to mold them easily. Whenever you walk away from your project, you'll want to re-wet your working tubes when you come back. Alright, so I've just glued these 2 working tubes together and put a clip because I'm too impatient for the glue to dry. Now we will weave in our spokes using a basic twine weave, which we'll use for the whole basket. To do this, the top working tube will start behind the spoke in the bottom and front. The front tube will go over the back tube as it passes to the back, and repeat this to the end. So front goes over as it passes to the back. Make sure that they are evenly spaced out. Glue the other side together and clip it to allow it to dry sturdy. Alright, with a new working tube, bend it in half. Hook it onto the first spoke, and we will use the same twine weave. Remember, front goes over the back as it passes to the back. And when you go around corners, make sure you weave as tightly as you can. And we'll be weaving these 2 end pieces together. So for the bottom, it would probably be easier to turn this over and weave it like the top. But I decided to weave in round, so we're gonna do our twine weave but in reverse. So the top passes under the back working tube as it moves to the back. See how it passes under right here? And just continue on doing that. And once you get to the second corner, you'll start over. Alright, eventually you'll have to extend our working tubes. So To do that, grab new already wet tubes. On the side that you glued, we're going to cut it at an angle, and on the other side, we'll cut it at a flat. Flatten it and bend it to create a smaller and sharper edge. Add some glue into the flat end and stick your little pointy tube into the other tube. That's it. Super easy. That's how you extend your tubes. Alright, for this one, I've already woven across the top and we'll be adding our first spokes to the quadrant. To do this, flatten the ends and then place it where you want and weave around it. This will be the bottom of our basket, so don't worry too much about the tails. Then we're going to weave the end pieces together again. And continue around adding a spoke to each quadrant. For round 3, we won't be adding any spokes. Weave it just as you had this round, and I will see you in round 4. Again, I've already woven across the top. For this round, we'll be adding a spoke where we added a spoke in round 2. To do this, use your needle or pliers to create some space between the spoke and the weave and insert the new spoke in. You'll then weave these together. And weave your end pieces together again. Alright, for this round we won't be adding any spokes, but we will be separating our pairs and weaving them separately. We'll also be weaving our end pieces as individuals as well. You'll weave your 6th round separate like this, and I will see you for the 7th round when we add more spokes. Alright, this time we will be adding a new tube to each of our current spokes, so that is 3 new tubes per quadrant. You'll weave the new pairs together like you did last time. And after this round, the way you add spokes will follow our pattern, so I will put those up on the screen now. Follow this pattern until you've added all of your spokes. The last round you add tubes. You probably won't need to add one to every spoke, so try to add it where there are gaps. Use your last couple of rounds to try to make the spokes as evenly spread out as possible. If your ends are too short, extend them like you would your working tubes, just without wetting them. Alright, see you when you're done. So we finished weaving our base. You can see mine doesn't perfectly fit the template, but that's okay. First, we have to finish off our working tubes. Just cut, tuck, and add some glue. this is the time to get rid of all the tails from adding our spokes. Just cut them off and add some glue, and that's it. Alright, let's flip this bad boy over so we can edge our basket. Alright, I want to note that I didn't wet any of these tubes because I like when my edges stick out a bit, but if you want an edge that's tight, I recommend wetting them. Anyways, back to the video. Grab a tube, bend it like so. We'll be using this as a placeholder for our last tube. Bend your first tube up and hook our placeholder onto it. Then bend the second tube up. Bend our first tube around the second tube. Bend your third tube up. Bend your second tube around your third tube, and then continue like this for the whole basket. Alright, we've come all the way around to our last tube. Pull out the placeholder, then put the last tube into the hole left by the placeholder and pull it through. Our basket's now all edged. We only need one front, so I'll be extending the short tubes on this side. Cut the tube at an angle, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch above the edge, and then slide the new tubes on. The process is really similar to how I showed you how to extend the tubes earlier. The short tubes on this side I'll be using as the front of the basket. The opening is a little bit smaller than I want, so I'm cutting this tube to make it bigger. Glue just below where you'll cut to help prevent any fraying or unraveling while we're weaving. And then just cut it. We want to start on the round part so it's less noticeable. I'll be starting mine here, which is on the back side. To attach the working tubes, we'll cut the glue ends at an angle and glue them to the back of the spokes. Taking the marker, we'll place it on the spoke that the first tube went behind. Alright, we're gonna do our twine weave again. So take this front one, pass it over as it goes behind. Again, our front one goes over as it passes to the back. And just continue weaving around until you have done 6 complete rounds. Now that we've done our 6 rounds, we will start making the opening part of the front. We won't be weaving around these smaller ones. We'll turn around on these 2 longer tubes on either end. So first, bend the back tube around to the front, and then the front tube around to the back. And now we'll be doing our twine weave, but in reverse again. So pass your front tube to the back. Then bring your back tube over the other tube as it comes forward. So front tube goes to the back. And the back tube passes over as it comes to the front. Do that all the way around, and once you get to the other side, we're gonna turn around again. So this one, front tube goes back and under, back tube comes forward and over. And now we get to do our regular twine weave again. So front passes over back as it goes back. Continue this back and forth until you get to a height that you want, and I'll see you to finish this bad boy off. Alright, we're ending right where we started. Cut the extra length off your working tubes and add a generous amount of glue. We'll be doing a type of braid to finish off the top. We're going to start by bending the tube around the one next to it, similar to how we edged the base. When we get to the other side, we'll take the last tube and feed it through the back of the last loop. Heading back, we'll be feeding the spokes through the fronts of the loops. Alright, for our very last tube, we'll feed it through the last loop as well. So you should have 2 tubes going through that last loop. Now cut all the extra off, and we're left with a nice little basket. Last step is to add a ton of glue to all the places that we cut tubes. And then rub it all in and you're done.